shifted a cost from one place to another
Yeah.
over two borders.
Yeah.
And because of the particular private way in which these things are accounted for, this is a form of socializing the loss.
Yeah, no,
So,
exactly. No, I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, for example, a couple of years ago, I realized that my checkbook was stolen in the process of being posted to me. So there must have been some illegal gang operating through the post office, and some guys wrote two checks, one in my name, one in my wife's name, uh, amounting to a collective sum of nearly £9,000. And we try to stop these checks. I mean, I found them totally accidentally. I don't check my bank account every day. I mean, that day I happened to check it, and I try to stop these checks, and I mean, I had to spend huge amount of time waiting for someone to pick up the phone to do this. Yeah. And
while they were writing more checks.
That's right. Yeah, and thankfully there were only two checks, and I mean, after a lot of they wouldn't do it immediately. I mean, they passed people around, passed me around to other people, and anyway, so after a lot of trouble, I get to stop these checks, and I demand that I see the checks. They send me copies of the checks. The signature doesn't even remotely look like what our signatures are, because these people just stole the checkbook, not our kind of wallet or anything. And when I protested to them, look, I mean, how can you pass these checks when the signatures are not even similar? And my beloved Barclays Bank responded that, oh, these days we do not check signatures on all checks. We don't have enough manpower to do it.
So this seems to be a really very good. It is a parable in a way, because back to this point of what we keep coming back to. It seems to me that one, there's a question of the system we built and the market system we built relied on a whole lot of behaviors, and in particular a whole lot of restraints, which it seems were presumed to exist, presumed to work, and there's a sense in which the profit motive is indeed so incredibly efficient that it's going to hone itself eventually to find every point in the system at which you can do this particular trick of socializing a loss and
that's right. Yeah. So basically they have reached a point where they actually redefine what they are selling. So in the old days, when you buy a banking service, you
buy some safety.
That's right. Presumed product is that they at least check the signature on the check. Now you cannot even take that for granted, and the kind of the time and energy I had to waste to get this right. Well, not even right. I mean, to stop these checks and
Yes, but actually, interestingly, presumably, Barclays accepted their fault and credited your account again.
Yeah.
So there's a sense in which it was a truly socialized loss,
that's right.
in that it was socialized over everyone else's.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was recouped through Barclays, no doubt, Barclays trading division.
The checks that actually went through.
Socialized.
Yeah, I stopped it in time, but I mean that would be the kind of implication. Yeah.
So here again, I'd like to come back to two central questions, which is one, how do we? There's the very big question, which is what is the mechanism, what is the process which allocates capital? So there's a sense in which I think we feel that the production of current goods and services is pretty simple business, that no one, that there are no real mysteries, and even market failures there. Clear-cut market failures we sort of know in this 1930s way how to deal with. So how do we allocate capital? And two, how do we, so at the moment we have this pretense of a market system. It's a pretense of a market system because in fact it relies on all these social decisions.
Exactly, yeah.
So do we need to reinvent a way of allocating capital which includes explicitly those social parameters in the decision making?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is possible. I mean, one important thing is that we start by, as I argue in the first chapter of my new book, we start by saying that actually markets are political constructs, and there's a need to debate exactly what we are selling, what we are buying, that what is the product, what are the obligations and the rights involved, and so on. So you need that kind of if you like, philosophical and political debate, but you also need to change if it were felt that some of the measures were getting outdated, or they are kind of leading people to behave in ways that are collectively kind of destructive and so on, then you'll have to change the measurement. So, for example, now even the World Bank is trying to measure ways to take into account the fact that you are running down the natural capital as you produce things. I mean, of course, even within the World Bank, this is a tiny minority, so it's not widely accepted. I mean, increasingly increasingly as more and more women start working, we are beginning to value the kind of household labor services that we used to get from them for free. Huh?
That's right. Yeah, supposedly.
That's right. So this old economist joke is that you marry a housekeeper, you reduce your national income.
Your national income, absolutely.
So that you might have to change the way things are measured. I mean, you might have to clearly specify that I mean, this could be interpreted as a standard regulation, but you have to clearly specify in the banking rules that thou shall check this signature.
You were talking about measurement, and the idea that maybe one of the solutions, for example, is to have proper balance sheets to know what it is that we're to properly account for the costs of the decisions that we're taking. I suppose I keep trying to get this conversation onto political institutions, because it seems to me the example of TRIPS was a very good one. That one of the that even with the measurement question, there's a real question of influence and who writes the rules, how the rules are written for the system that we live in. So we have we recognise that the allocation of capital has got a lot of social elements built into it, and yet we also know that the complexity of the world that we're dealing with is one in which those with information are those who are most informed are those who spend most on the process, who have the most concentrated interest in the outcome. So it seems as if, in some ways, the piece that is really broken is a piece that has got to do with how the rules are made. How should we be? How should we be thinking about getting that bit right?
In short, you need some kind of affirmative action in the sense that I mean, I got to learn a lot about this through researching on the WTO. I mean that I have probably used this story in one of my writings. I mean, I have a former student who, I mean, now he's in the UN system, but used to be a rather high-ranking official of his native African country, and he was stationed as the first secretary in the embassy in Geneva. And in one of my trips to Geneva, that he told me, look, I mean, in my embassy, if you eliminate those political appointees who play golf every day, there are essentially 3 people to attend all the meetings in the UN, in the WTO, in the ILO, everywhere. Huh? And there are like 12 meetings a day. I mean, how can we even go to all those meetings? So we divided up between the 3 of us. We try to go to all meetings at least for a short while. Sometimes we go in at the right time, say 1 or 2 useful things. Sometimes that we are completely lost, so the times are entirely wasted. But to my surprise, he added that actually, however, my country is actually in a much better position than many other developing countries. There are 22 countries which have no one in Geneva, and most other developing countries have to do with the 1 or 2. And this in contrast, the American mission here has literally dozens of people who are working on intellectual property rights alone. And you call this negotiation,
of course the other. I mean, what you're describing is a rather depressing view of globalization, because on the one hand, as you said at the beginning, globalization and complexity means that there are more and more spillover effects that need social control.
That's right.
This effectively means that we need to think about, for all sorts of things, we need to think about government and regulation at a global level, and this is intellectual property or environment, etc., etc. These social dumping, these need to be thought of at a global level. And yet, at that global level, we have, it's not just that America, it's not as if, American democracy, the American people are the ones who are in control of the drafting of TRIPS.
Right,
it's that it's
particular
Hollywood
interest,
and its particular
right,
interests within those that are so there's a sense in which, of course, that the nations, there are nations who are excluded altogether.
Yeah.
Actually, most American people are part of the excluded world in that
Exactly,
they are certainly not involved in that. Now, do we have a sense here of complexity having run away with us? How do we get back in control of these spillover effects?
Yeah, no, I think there are two dimensions to this. I mean, first of all, political control. I mean, essentially, one shouldn't be so naive to think that we could, live in a world where everyone has equal say in everything that's going on. It's impossible. Yeah? But there has to be some recognition of the fact that some people have far too much access to critical decisions for the good of the greater society, and there has to be some restrictions. That things like lobbying. You could reduce it greatly by putting severe restrictions on what you can do. It's not impossible to make its impact less. For example, one of the more controversial decisions in American politics was this decision that corporations have the same freedom of speech as individuals. It has a huge impact on what.
Yes. So in a sense, even the most independent institution in the democratic world, the American Supreme Court,
exactly,
has fallen behind the interests of the corporate lobbyists.
That's right. Yeah.
There's something which does seem rather.
I know it's alarming, but that in order to solve any problem, you first have to recognize it. But unfortunately, at the moment, there isn't even enough recognition that all these supposedly objective entities like the American Supreme Court or the WTO and so on are highly influenced by particular interest, and the airing that problem, I think, is the first step towards solution. Now, having somehow agreed on these like greater principles, then you come to more nitty-gritty issues of how do you then ensure that these things are mitigated. I don't think it can ever be eliminated. So that do you that is some recognition. For example, in the WTO, there is a recognition that trade lawyers are expensive, and if a developing country want to take a case to the dispute settlement court, they'll need to be given subsidies to hire international trade lawyer. Unfortunately, as it happens with all legal systems, these publicly provided lawyers are all second rate. So that is a built-in bias towards defeat. So that you may have to go one step further and say, no, actually we are going to match the fee of the other party and give lawyers of equal caliber. And we have to make every member state to pay for this, because we are, by doing this in the long run, providing the most important public good, which is the legitimacy of the decisions of the organization. Once people do not, begin to distrust the decisions made in the system on the ground, they had more expensive lawyers, and they had more people working on it, and so on, then the whole organization is undermined. So
I think that's a very interesting and important point. I presume that in a sense, one of the thrusts of your book is that the free market ideology is itself a legitimizing principle, and that part of the work of saying it's not true is to take away the legitimacy that it does bring to all sorts of things, that's including right, decisions of the Supreme Court or decisions at the WTO, and that once we have this sense that it's not because that's how the market makes things happen that they're legitimate, then we have at least some possibility of control again.
Yeah, that's right. No, there are many layers to this